October 1958. A knife shop on the edge of Prescott, Arizona. A man in a canvas jacket picked up a hunting knife from the display case and read the name etched into the ricasso. And what he said next broke 4 years of silence that a 63-year-old knife maker named Harlan Pruitt had been keeping so well that most people in Prescott had stopped noticing it was there. What came after that afternoon would keep the shop open for 19 more years, send Harlan's son home from California, and leave something in a wooden case above a workbench in the White Mountains that has been there for 41 years. Harlan was at the grinder when the man walked in. He did not look up right away. Here is the story. The shop sat at the north end of Gurley Street, in a low adobe building that had been a harness repair before Harlan took the lease in 1936 and stayed. It smelled of quench oil and steel dust and the mesquite that burned in the stove from October through March, and there was a light above the workbench that Harlan had wired himself in 1941 that cast everything in a warm, particular yellow that made the steel on the bench look like it was already finished. Knives hung on pegs along the left wall. A Bowie with a 12-inch blade had been there since 1955, waiting for a man who had commissioned it and never come back. On the glass display case near the door lay a sharpening steel, a cloth, and a hand-lettered card. H. Pruitt, Custom Blades, Prescott, Arizona. Harlan Pruitt had worked steel in that building for 22 years. He had learned the trade from an older smith and brought it to his own hands through 2 decades of custom orders, hunting knives, belt knives, Bowies for men who knew what they were asking for. The particular draw of a bevel on a blade, the way the steel tells you when it is ready if your hands have learned to listen. He had been listening for 22 years. His son, Cody, had worked the shop with him from 1950 until the spring of 1954. 4 years at the bench learning the draw and the grind, building a hand knowledge of his own that Harlan had watched with the quiet satisfaction of a man seeing something continue past him. In the spring of 1954, Cody shipped to Korea. 2nd Infantry Division, 8th Army, the Mundongni Valley. He came back to Prescott in the fall of 1953 and stood in the shop doorway for a long moment before he came in, and Harlan had looked at him and known that something had been left in the Mundongni Valley that was not coming back. Cody worked the bench through the winter. By spring he was gone to Burbank, California, and a job in a machine shop. In 4 years he had come back to Prescott twice. Each time he stood at the bench and watched Harlan work, and said very little, and each time he drove back. Harlan had not asked why. Cody was not a man who could answer that question yet. The lease on the adobe had gone to a new owner in 1957, a real estate operator from Phoenix named Dale Whitfield, who ran his properties through a management company. The new rate, effective January of 1958, was $54 a month. The old rate had been $31. By April, Harlan had written Cody a letter explaining the situation and saying he did not want help. He was writing only so Cody would know. Cody had not written back. By October, the savings were gone. He had an appointment the following week with a man from First Arizona Bank who had a process for this kind of thing and was pleasant about it on the telephone. He was at the grinder sharpening the Bowie that had been on the peg since 1955, not because there was a reason, but because his hands needed something to do. The door opened. He did not look up right away. The man who came in was large enough that the door seemed to exhale when he stepped through it. He wore a canvas jacket and a tan Stetson with the crease pressed out by weather, and he moved the way some men move in a space they have never been in before, taking it in without announcing that he was taking it in. He looked at the knives on the wall. He looked at the display case. He walked to it and looked through the glass. He looked at the Bowie on the peg. Then he looked at Harlan. "Your work," he said. It was not a question. 22 years, Harlan said. The man nodded. He looked back at the display case. He pointed to a hunting knife near the left corner, a 5-inch drop point with a stag handle and a full flat grind that Harlan had finished in August, one of the cleanest pieces he had made in years. The man picked it up when Harlan opened the case. He held it the way a man holds a knife when he means to understand it, blade flat across 2 fingers, feeling the balance, turning it once to see the grind line follow through. He turned it over. On the ricasso, just above the guard, in small, clean letters, H. Pruitt. He read it. He looked up. "Pruitt," he said. "That's right. I know that name," the man said. He set the knife on the glass. There was a man named Pruitt. 2nd Infantry. Mundongni Valley, fall of '53. Sergeant, good man. The grinder had been off since the man walked in. The shop was quiet the way a shop goes quiet when something that was not expected arrives. Harlan put the bowie down on the cloth. "That's my son," he said. "If you've ever had 4 years of not knowing how to start a conversation, drop a comment below. Drop your state. This one reaches further than Prescott." The man was still for a moment. He looked at Harlan, then at the H. Pruitt on the ricasso, then back. He set his hat on the corner of the display case. He saved 3 men in a drainage ditch outside Mundongni in September of '53, the man said. Got them out of a situation that had no business having a good outcome. Word of it went around. Men who weren't there knew his name. Harlan did not say anything. He was standing at the grinder with his hands at his sides, and something was moving across his face that had not been there when the man walked in. "I've been meaning to find someone who could tell him that for a while," the man said. "I didn't know where to look." He picked the hunting knife back up. He turned it in his hand. "I'll take this one," he said. "And the bowie on the peg, if you'll let it go." He reached into his jacket. "And you're going to write down Cody's address in Burbank, and I'm going to send him a letter. And in that letter I'm going to tell him that his father's name is on the blade of every knife in this case, and that this shop does not close." Harlan opened his mouth. "I need 2 good knives," the man said. "I've got a production in Tucson next month, and the prop department has been sourcing hardware that won't hold an edge. You're solving my problem." He set bills on the glass. He did not count them in front of Harlan. He pulled a card from his shirt pocket and set it beside the money and looked at Harlan and waited. Harlan wrote the address on a piece of paper from behind the counter. His hand was not shaking. It was close. The man folded the paper and put it in his jacket. He picked up his hat. "Write him yourself," the man said. "Before I do, tell him what I told you." He went out. Harlan stood at the counter with the 2 bills under his hand and the card beside them. He looked at the wall where the bowie had been. He looked at the empty space on the peg. He went to the back of the shop and found a piece of paper and a pen, and he sat down on the stool beside the grinder, and he wrote to his son for the first time in 4 years about something other than the shop and the lease and the weather in Prescott. The letter reached Burbank in 4 days. Cody Pruitt drove from Burbank to Prescott in November of 1958 in a truck that needed the oil changed and with 2 days off from the machine shop. He came through the door of the Adobe building on Gurley Street, the same way he always had, stopping in the doorway for a moment before coming in. He stood at the bench and watched his father work. This time he stayed. He was at the bench through December. By January he had given his notice in Burbank. By March of 1959 he was working full days beside Harlan, getting back what 4 years in a machine shop had kept on hold, and what Korea had not taken from him, just stored somewhere he had not been able to reach. The shop did not close. Harlan ran it with Cody until 1971. 35 years in the Adobe building on Gurley Street, from the day Harlan took the lease to the day he turned the grinder off for the last time and handed Cody the keys. He was 75. He died in 1974 in Prescott, in the house on Copper Basin Road, where he had lived since 1939. Cody ran the shop until 1989. 30 years between the two of them after the afternoon in October of 1958, in a building that had been 12 months from ending. His daughter, May, had come into the shop at 13 years old and stood at the bench the way Cody had stood in doorways, watching first, then closer, then not leaving. She had her grandfather's draw on a bevel. Cody said it the first time he watched her finish a blade, and he did not say it to compliment her. He said it because it was true, and it was the most important thing he could say. May Pruitt runs a knife shop in Show Low, in the White Mountains east of Prescott, in a building with a north-facing window that gives the right light on the steel. She moved there in 1991 after Cody retired, taking the grinder and the bench vise and the particular yellow lamp Harlan had wired above the workbench in 1941. It still works. She has not replaced the bulb. Above the bench in Show Low, on a wooden rack beside the lamp, hangs a hunting knife with a stag handle and a full flat grind. 5-inch drop point. The grind line follows through on both sides the way Harlan did it, which is the way May does it, which is the way Cody learned it from watching both of them. On the ricasso, in the letters Harlan stamped the same way for 35 years. H. Pruitt. It is not for sale. It has never been for sale. The morning light comes through the north window and crosses the blade for about an hour after sunrise before the angle changes, and in that hour, the steel holds a clean, even light, the kind of light that shows a grind line at its truest. Then the sun moves, and the knife goes back to what it is the rest of the day. The wood rack. The lamp. The name. John Wayne never told anyone, not the prop department in Tucson, not his director, not in any letter, not in any interview, not in any account that anyone who knew him has produced in the years since. He came back to the Tucson production with 2 knives that held an edge and said he had found a maker in Prescott, and they were done sourcing from the supplier in Phoenix. He sent a letter to an address in Burbank in November of 1958. What was in it is not known. What came of it drove to Prescott in a truck that needed the oil changed and came through a door and did not leave. There is a kind of silence that is not peace. A man at a grinder sharpening a knife that has nowhere to go, in a shop that is 12 months from closing. With a son in California, he does not know how to reach across 4 years of a thing neither of them has found words for yet. Most people do not walk into that silence. They are not aware it is there. It takes a man who reads a name on a blade and understands, without being told, that the name means more than the blade. Some things, once said, don't need to be said again. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.